All right, everyone, welcome back. Thank you. It's almost post time here. Unless you're Gulfstream Park, then you have 6 more minutes to go after you go to 00. Uh-oh. I'm getting punchy here, sorry. This is the TPA Mark Kaufman workshop that we have honoring Mark's memory, and Jessica Paquette's gonna lead the panel here, so I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Jessica Paquette. I'm the announcer at Parks, also the vice president of the TPA, and I thank the TPA for giving me the opportunity to moderate this panel and the RTIP for giving us the chance to have these candid and interesting discussions that I hope further the industry. Now, in the good old days, horse racing was all you had to watch and wager. And now with competition of sports betting comes opportunity for us to continue to get the sport in front of new audiences, develop new fans, and continue to up our game a little bit. We don't need to get lost in the shuffle of sports betting. And as we navigate a wagering landscape that gives players so many options, I brought some very smart people up to the stage to talk about some ways we can all go forward together, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Well, I'm Marshall Graham. I'm a professor of economics at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm a horse owner, breeder, involved in the game in a number of different ways, horse player, most notably.
Matthew Feig. I am Chief Operating Officer for Naira Bets. Been in the business since 1996 when I started out then it was Philadelphia Park. Worked in many different facets of business, and I've landed in ADW for the last 15 years or so.
I'm Nelson Clemens. I am the CEO of AmWest Entertainment and AmWager, our online platform. I started on the sports side of horse racing and came into the industry side in the early 2000s and founded AmWest in 2004. My wife and I currently breed in Kentucky, breed and race in Kentucky and France. But we've had a long-standing run at it, and pleased to be here today.
I'm Zach Taylor, Director of Sales and Business Development for Global Tote, racetrack industry program graduate, avid racing fan, avid bettor, accredited steward at one point, and thanks to the TPA for having me.
Thank you all for joining me. And now we'll start with the first question. As we navigate a wagering landscape that does give players so many options, what are some ways racing can work with, not against sports books? Now, Matt, your background does go all the way back to some marketing. We'll start with you.
Well, the marketing's a long time ago, but thank you very much. With respect to the sports books, it is the greatest opportunity that we have from a wagering standpoint and the ability to bring in new fans that we've seen in the last decade. So that's first and foremost. Second of all, how we work with them as far as the marketing standpoint is there's different paths. One is technology. It's incumbent upon the industry to make a platform that can be intertwined with the sports betting platform. So you have NFL, you have NBA, you have horse racing. And the horse racing has to be in a format that is digestible to the sports betting customer. So it's incumbent on us to kind of work on it with the technology to make sure that it's appealing to that level of customer. Then it's the economics. We have to make the economics feasible for the sports books to invest their considerable marketing machine into the actual promotions. As we all know, if someone's investing a lot of marketing dollars into it, then a handle will follow. The key thing with us as a sport, and I'm reminded of an article I read in Investor Business Daily recently, and I'm going to key on the WNBA and MLS, which is, I think we would all agree, is probably not two hotbeds for wagering activity, but they saw significant jumps in wagering activity because of Caitlin Clark and because of Leo Messi. And as a sport, if we can market our stars the same way, at least it's an entrance point for the sports bettor to say, like, hey, whatever star is running, I want to have a fancy bet on that horse, and that's how you kind of get them into the funnel. But there is multiple different paths to do it, but working with the sports book is just a great, giant opportunity for us. It's all incremental handle.
Now on the subject of technology. Nelson, how can racing capitalize on technology to further our position in the wagering landscape?
I think in a great way, we do have a lot of data that we can mine and use to better understand our customer behavior and to help guide and teach them to wager more successfully. We have in our industry, especially more in recent history, the experience of players just being short-term and burning out, and having the option of sports betting is a key factor. And with that, we've developed tools. There are tools in the industry that can, help make a difference, really boost a player's performance and to be more engaged. And I guess the ones I think are important are the ones that we've incorporated on our wagering platform. We have the Dutching, which adjusts your bet, the dollars with the changing odds to optimize your payoff, maybe simply said to win more and lose less. We have the ranking, the ABC wagering, conditional wagering, the exchange pool wagering, the fair value exactor grid, which is a key information for a lot of players that shows the exactas that are overbet or underbet in any pool. And just to really focus on the player experience, if a player is betting multiple bets per race or card, we have a robust file upload system, a wager queue for future wagering, a favorite track setup, live video streaming and race replays. We have, of course, the current and historical race results, but and the ability just to customize on our platform your preferences, to make it the experience that any given player would want. But our platform was developed initially in the late 2000s by professional and seasoned players. It was built by players for players that wanted to build the ideal. And in this case, we have the speed, the power, the ease of use. Our navigability is one thing that we get constant positive feedback with, in that you never need to leave our screen to do any feature or function. And we update the data and the pool odds up to 60 times faster than some other ADWs. But maybe the most significant, and we'll probably talk about this in general, feature that and innovation that we've developed in recent history is what we call our true odds. It's a predictive algorithm that recalculates and delivers very accurate final win odds. So this is meant to counter the fluctuating odds that you see primarily when the gate opens on any given race. And we think that by leveling out the odds, it helps any player bet more successfully. It takes away some real frustration. We also see it as a bridge, one of the bridges that maybe we can use to attract sports bettors who are used to the fixed odds. But this is something we hope tracks would incorporate to have more accurate morning line odds, as well as the players. I think we need to modernize our industry systems, and this is one software development that I think could be very key to that. And I wanted to offer, I don't know if our emails are on the attendee list, but we do have an extensive white paper on true odds, and I'd be pleased to share it with anyone who want to read it through.
Excellent. Now we'll look a little bit globally. Horse racing continues to be an extremely popular sport on an international stage. Zach, how can we capitalize on some of that international interest? We see massive crowds and massive interest on these big international days.
Right, and we do a pretty good job in some areas of it. Obviously, recruiting horses from other places around the world to run here is going to help that out. Some things that we could do that probably wouldn't be too big of a lift, standardizing the way we adjudicate races. Shout out to our good friends in Oklahoma. for going ahead and moving that way. But, you know, normalizing it for a global audience, giving them a product that they're used to betting, and doing everything we can to improve our product. You know, that, you know, with the regulatory background, it's close to my heart. Category 1 seems like it's a good way to go. But yeah, I think everything we can do to normalize a product to a global standard is going to help create garnering that interest from other countries.
Well, for me, I came into horse racing because I loved horses, and that is the entry point for a lot of folks. But horse racing can catch a lot of people in a lot of different ways. What are some of the advantages that horse racing has that separates it from other sports in capturing a new audience? Nelson, we'll start with you, but this is really a question for everyone because we all find our way to this sport in a lot of different ways.
Well, I think one thing is the frequency of the product. We run 7 days a week, almost 24 hours a day. And with that, I think it's just a real advantage to have that always available. And I think, and we experienced it during the pandemic when other sports are off season, or in the case of the pandemic, we saw how our handle went up. So just, you know, having a steady stream of product, I think, is one advantage. I think the other advantage, and it is an advantage of pari-mutuel wagering, even though it might have a couple kinks we're trying to work with here, as opposed to fixed odds wagering, where we don't have, or the track doesn't have a vested interest in the outcome of the bet. We want the player to win. We want the player to win. We want to give them the tools, the information, the experience to make that happen in sports betting. And you will see so many of the sports books now under the guns for limiting accounts, capping payoffs. And, you know, in this case, we can provide a great array of bets. I think we still have with pari-mutuel a lot of bets that we can do otherwise, prop bets, jockey trainer bets during a race card or a meet that we can use. And there's always a tradition in our sport, but you know, we have to be careful not to let that tradition get in the way of trying and testing new things.
And Matt, how would you sell horse racing to someone who's never bet on it before?
Well, that's a loaded question. It really depends on the market. So I'll kind of keep backing onto the sports side of it because that's kind of the synergies there. I think Nelson has it right that because we have constant content, because we have the availability, and we also, especially over the last few years, have really invested in the TV side of it, where we have much more exposure. I mean, obviously with Fox and America's Day at the Races, we have well over 1,000 hours of live television coverage. That really is the kind of funnel that gets people into it. It's, you know, it's multiple things. It's the majesty of the sport. It's the possibility of winning large amounts of money. It's no different than the sports betting companies doing these same game parlays or these massive parlays that they put out there and saying, like, if you bet $10, you can have a game life-changing score. You have that ability in horse racing in any race every 2 to 3 minutes. So we have significant advantages, and we also have significant advantages in data. We have the ability, you know, we own our own data, we have all these analytics to drive into, as Nelson said, we want the people to win, to help people win. You know, we're not, you know, our customers aren't playing against us. So it's in our best interest to actually help them, and we have the data to do so. So I think, you know, you put all that together, there's tons of advantages and opportunities for us.
And Marshall, how do you explain horse racing to a new audience?
Well, I think the great thing about racing is it's, in many ways, it's so straightforward. Everyone talks about how horse racing is challenging. You read the form, and there's so many things in the form, and there's so much information. But if if you're watching an NFL game and you've not watched football before, football is extremely complicated. Or you think about trying to pick up a game like cricket, right? People are betting cricket. It's a hugely bet sport. I turn on cricket, I have no idea what's going on. Anyone who flips by a race has at least some idea, right? These are horses running, and there'll be a finish line, and the winner wins. So in many ways, our sport is one of the easiest out there, right? And so that's a major positive. And again, race many times a day. We can promote the sport such that we can have winners. We don't turn away winners. We want winners. When people bet more, all is good for the sport. Now that leads into potential problems.
And what are some of the disadvantages?
Well, again, I get to be a little bit of the bad guy here. If we are, selling the sport that we want winners, and as opposed to people betting, fixed odds sporting events where they'll get cut up by bookmakers, we're going to get more sophisticated bettors who come in and bet horse racing. Right? A lot of people bet football, right? And when they bet football, they know a lot about football already. There are a lot of people who watch football on Sunday, and so when they're making bets, and when they're making crazy same-game parlays that ultimately have large takeout rates, they're still enjoying the sport, they're consuming the sport, they're watching the game, they know something about football, right? For horse racing, to get those people to come over and watch our fairly simple sport of horses running in circles, how are they going to jump in and therefore bet twice beaten nickels at Parks going to mile 16, right? That's a big.
I would like that.
Yes, I love
like
it.
that.
I was in one of those today if Parks are running. So that's a tricky proposition. And then from a pricing standpoint, again, if we're suddenly attractive to players who see the fact that there's a parimutuel sport and there's there's the ability to win, we price our product that's equivalent to going to a roulette wheel with 7 to 15 green zeros on it, right? So that makes it pretty much impossible for the recreational player to come over and win. The recreational player can bet sports, right? If they bet sports and they're just betting a single game, right? They're facing a 4 to 5% takeout rate. Here with us, it's 16 to 30%. And then you put on top of that the dramatic odds movements, right? One of the biggest things we've seen in the rise of the computer teams is the fact that they just dramatically shift the odds in the last moment. And so, the clarity for a sports bettor to come over and bet a horse at 4 to 1 and to see the horse ultimately go off at 8 to 5 is a big problem for the sport. And again, at many tracks, 40% of the money comes in the last click. Odds move at a typical track. Even for favorites, we don't know who the favorite is 20% of the time, right? The favorite will jump. And so that's a tricky problem, and it's especially prominent in the exacta pool, right, in the doubles, where we see just a smaller amount of money will affect the prices. And so I know what Nelson's doing with True Odds has been helpful. Other tracks are displaying imputed doubles, and that can help. But ultimately, the way the sport is designed now, with those late movements, it makes it harder for a sports bettor to understand to come over, and they experience that once. Hell, even hardened horse players are seeing it and are moving away from our sport. So pricing, odds movements, those are things that are problems. And then, especially with the takeout now, the decline in field size, which we've seen across all tracks, especially in the last couple of years, really inflates inflates takeout, right? It sort of it magnifies the high takeout that recreational players pay. So. Those are my big concerns over ultimately attracting sports bettors. The ones that we're going to get, they're likely to be looking for a game that they can at least have the illusion of winning, and then we make it harder on them in that ways.
And Zach, where do you see opportunities in the market, and how do fixed odds fit into this conversation?
Well, one of the toughest things to try and attract a new player is to have them come in, whether it's ADW, whether it's on track, they pick the right horse. Their horse finishes first, and from the time the gate pops, they bet the horse at 7 to 1. Winning price is 7 to 2. Fixed odds is obviously a way that you can get that locked in, and they've made a winning bet. They're going to feel like a winner, as opposed to making a winning bet and feeling like a loser because I thought I was going to get this, instead I got that. That's going to be great. I mean, from the inception of it at Monmouth Park, I was able to be there at the beginning and teaching the on-course patrons that, hey, you can actually price shop. You know, you've got a tote price and you've got a fixed price. Which one suits you better? It was a pretty phenomenal thing to watch. People caught on to it very quickly, and it's a fairly simple thing to do. So I think there's a lot of room for growth, especially with, you know, we've got 6 years since the PASPA repeal, and I believe in 2023, the American sports handle was between 110 and 120 billion, and I think we might touch 11 billion in horse racing this year. So that seems like a wave that, you know, we might want to look at riding, and the natural bridge to get some of that sports over to racing would be putting in a language that they can understand and giving them the opportunity to bet it in that fashion.
Well, speaking of a language that they understand, oftentimes in horse racing, we are speaking a language all of our own, but we're getting a savvy sports betting audience that is familiar with wagering and sports. How do we speak their language, Marshall?
You know, I don't think we change our language all that much. I don't think we need to dumb down our sport. You don't turn on a football game and, you know, they talk about, well, each first down is 10 yards and, you know, every field goal is 3 and a touchdown 6 and the extra point. So I don't think we should try to dumb down our broadcast. In many ways, people want to learn more. My son, who's plays fantasy football but doesn't bet football, he's only 17, but he does it. He loves football. He subscribes to all these different analytical sites, PFF. He looks at stuff like quarterbacks, you know, EPA. I don't even know what this stuff means, but there's just this heavy analytical content in football that we don't, you know, we have in horse racing to some extent. There is all that data, but, you know, it's not really publicly discussed and talked about. You know, we still talk about speed figures, a little bit of ground loss, but there could be, you know, in analyzing races or talking about horse racing changes in mile per hour, middle moves. We don't hear that much high-level analytical discussion or even analytical analysis. Now, maybe it's certainly done by the teams, but, you know, I don't see a big movement towards that in the sport for public consumption. So in many ways, I don't think we should change. I think people see this, you know, when they flip on the broadcast, they see this very simple sport of horses going in circles, and then as they want to pursue knowledge, they want to learn the lingo. They want to learn more about reading the racing form, and the more information we can give them, and, you know, meaning pretty much anything, right, that we can record, I think the more they'd want to use it. So I would play to our analytical edge. The fact that this is a puzzle that we're trying to solve, and not try to soften what we're doing. And furthermore, like, there'll be people that talk about, like, the idea of, you know, are reading the odds too complicated versus money line? If someone can read the money line to odds problem is not a real problem for our sport, right? And even if we start displaying the odds as money lines, they're not going to. It's actually going to make things worse, because someone's going to think they're getting plus 600 when ultimately they're getting, you know, 3-2, right? So it almost would fool people to think they're getting fixed odds, right? So in my mind, that you know, from our display and our content, I wouldn't soften it.
Now to shift gears a little bit, there does always seem to be contention that the current takeout rates in racing discourage existing customers or discourage us from attracting new customers. How does the takeout in racing actually compare to that of sports books? Matt, speak to this.
So you give me the controversial
topic,
topic,
I give you the tough one. Yeah.
So, you know, Marshall is correct. You know, there is price sensitivities out there. However, if we're looking at that sportsbook customer, I believe they're less price sensitive to this. So I don't necessarily think it's a barrier to the new incremental handle that we're looking to acquire. You know, there's certainly room for improvement in, you know, with our retail everyday players that are competing against, you know, in some jurisdictions, significant takeout. However, you know, when you look at, you know, same game parlays and in-game betting, you'll look at, you know, stuff that, you know, shows up minus 140, minus 150 on the line. You know, there is significant takeout in sports as well. And I don't see that as a barrier. You know, it's a decision that those customers have to make, whether they want to lay the 140 to win back 100, or, hey, do I want to invest in a win bet and have a 15% takeout and have a much better chance of winning. So I kind of leave that to the marketplace. You know, obviously as an industry, if we look at takeout, that obviously begs a larger discussion that we probably can't solve here. But we've been having that discussion for
So you're
years.
not fixing horse racing right now?
I cannot fix the horse racing on takeout
Okay,
right now.
cool.
no.
So for a player perspective or the customer experience, Marshall, we'll put you in your horse player role here, not necessarily your horse owner role, but what are some experiences that players should expect and that we should strive to be delivering to them?
Well, I think that we want more information. We want the information to be clean and accurate, so we want accurate timing of races. And again, the more information, the better. I mean, it's simple stuff like, what is being done to the track on a daily basis. Maybe even the beginning of a simulcast show, having a short interview with the track superintendent and getting some feel for what's being done to the dirt and turf surfaces. If the tractor does something in between races, just letting horse players know that could be just a little bit of information on the website. So we don't know, ultimately we don't know what information might be useful and what might not be. I think we record it all and let horse players deal with it. So I want good, clean information. I want accurate timing of races. I mean, it seems silly, but I feel like we're still not getting there. I think as part of all the information on a race, if it's a 6 furlong race and there's a 40-foot run-up, that's what I'd like to know, right? That should be as part of the display. 6 furlong race, 40-foot run-up. On the turf racing has gotten sort of ridiculous with the rail settings and the run-ups. So that should be full information, right? This turf race is a mile and a 16th with a 240-foot run-up with a rail setting of 24 feet, right? And so give us information, make it be accurate.
Okay.
Can I interject actually
Please.
jump on it? So I think it's important. Marshall's absolutely right, and you see it across all the other sports, right? You know about injuries. They're mandated to report injuries in NFL, NBA, and all these leagues. You know what's happening, and that transparency is absolutely important. And I think we have to adopt that and make sure that we convey that to our customers as well. There can't be any ambiguity about that stuff. So I completely agree.
Well, look, I mean, I would go as far as the extent, legally to release that, but I think it'd be wonderful for horse players. We have to remember we also have jockeys that are professional athletes. I mean, they go in and out of cycles as well. We can't get their medical records, but, if they're nursing injuries, it's nice to know too. So anything that's out there that we can acquire, be good.
I mean, it's fair. I mean, Joel Embiid, first of all, he's injured every game, so I know. But I know every day, pretty much every day, he's got a bone bruise in his knee, right? So those are things that we can contemplate and look at the future. What we kind of do is conveying information.
Well, I mean, it's simple things like them adding the weight of horses, right? Each race. I mean, any information we can get, I think, could be useful not only for horse players, but just for everyone's understanding of the game, and of course, what then contributes to horse safety and health and other things like that. I do want to go back to your point of and I hate to be, that all I come here and care about is takeout. People who are betting on sports and are playing these same game parlays are willing to accept the 17 to 20% takeout. They're already sort of invested in that sport. I mean, they're watching football games, and maybe they're not the most savvy bettors, but they're already invested in consuming the sport. They were probably consuming it as a fan many years before they started betting, and so they're not necessarily the most knowledgeable bettors. To get those people to come over the racing, right, they have to have some opportunity to win and turn their money. So the idea that someone betting these same game parlays in football, something they've watched since they were kids, to turning that into betting horses, we have to give them some of their money back and allow them to churn. Because if they come over and they bet horses and they get destroyed the first weekend because they're betting in the wrong pools and there's too high a takeout, they're not going to come back, right? Whereas for football, part of their betting when they're doing these parlays is a consumption activity.
Right? Well, that goes back to the original question about marketing with the sports books, and this is where the sports books know their customers better than I do. Right, for marketing. So yes, we have expertise in horse racing, but they know their customer. They can do predictive analysis on what these customers are going to do before the customer knows what they're going to do. So, I would leave that to them and say, like, hey, your customer, what bets should we promote? I've had substantial discussions with sportsbook operators where they, talk about the different prop style bets and everything. So I think it gets down to what wagers are actually more appropriate and more important to that audience. And that's what kind of needs to be marketed to them.
And look, ultimately, I believe in markets. And it's not like I believe that the industry needs to come in and tell the tracks they need to lower takeout. I believe the tracks themselves should realize that we're not pricing the product correctly for recreational players. And we're giving too big a discount to the teams, too big a discounts to the professionals, right? And that we need to narrow that gap. So, but again, I think that should be done at the track level. I'm waiting for, some of the big tracks to realize that. And especially as we start to bring in and attract these new casual players, we want them to churn, because when they churn, right, they learn more about their sport and they're more likely to dig deeper, make a move towards learning more about the sport, maybe get into ownership, maybe discover their love for the sport and move towards being more a professional player. And if they don't have a good first experience or good early experiences, they're not going to stick with us, right? And so, let's be churn. Let's induce churn.
Well, the wagering landscape isn't the only thing that is changing in the sport. The health of the industry is constantly in flux as well, as we have lost some racetracks over the past 2 decades. How does the health of the industry as a whole impact the future in a more competitive wagering landscape? Nelson, could you speak to this?
I think that is just all, the health of our industry is strictly based on our customer base, our player base. When we start to take our players seriously, tracks, ADWs, I mean, for all the things that we are talking about, that we try to deliver to players. And the thing is that the ADWs are now, as the years have evolved, are the one segment that is really engaging the players. We need to have the same kind of online presence as the sports books do, and we've got to build that in, align it with them, have our separate initiatives, but we've got to just understand that the revenues and the health of our sport really, at the end of the day, is all about that customer experience. And we've talked a lot today, and we will, about technology and data and rebates, but very simply, and I just think Matt was hitting on this well. The customer experience is just, and Marshall, what you've expressed, is what it all comes down to. And, we've got to find that path just to compete and build our industry in that way.
And Matt, are there any legislative hurdles to consider as we continue to move forward and cohabitate with sports betting?
So, yes, it's very interesting. So, sports betting has normalized online gaming for us. So, if you go back ADW a few years back, there's several problems. One, there was not many states where we can actually go and operate in. And 2, the payment processing part of it, we couldn't get underwritten by credit card processing. So we had credit card decline rates of like 60, 70, 80%. The banks wouldn't work with us. So from our standpoint, it's going to be key from a sports betting standpoint just to continue to move everything forward, right? Like to kind of look, and I'm kind of getting off topic here, but just to continue to look at the sport as a whole and just to understand that we have a wonderful product, right? The TV ratings for the Kentucky Derby this year were the highest since 1989, right? You equate that to what happened in the marketplace. What happened in the marketplace? We have significant investment from the sports books. So the health of the sport as a whole, I think there's so many positives here. And from a regulatory standpoint, this is the key part of this. With the normalization of the sports books, it's brought into the marketplace regulators who are treating ADWs like they would the sports book providers. And ultimately speaking, the biggest barrier that we have is we don't have the same margin analysis that the sports book providers have. So in North Carolina is probably the perfect example that's out there in the space right now, that the sports betting fee is $1 million. For an ADW, for Nelson or Naira Bets to go in there, it's $1 million. There's nobody in North Carolina right now from an ADW standpoint. So with all the positive that we see from the health of the industry, we do need partnership from the regulators, and it's up to us as an industry to educate the regulators, A, on our economics, and B, what the commonalities are between us and the sports books and what the differences are.
And Zach, with your background, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, yeah. The regulatory hurdles, specifically in fixed odds, we have a very unique country here in that, we are regulated state to state. So, you know, it's kind of like you get over one hurdle, you get over two hurdles, well, there's 48 more to go. So every case is a little bit different, but, you know, these are battles worth fighting. You know, we've got a great sport. And, you know, on a separate note, you know, I'm sitting in a room full of purists, and we all know that, you know, this is a great game. But in the vein of acquiring new customers, you know, Marshall made the point about, you know, sports bettors, they love their sport, right? They're going to watch it anyway. And when you see the success of HHR and what it's been able to do on the pari-mutuel system based on horse racing results, I think the gamification of horse betting, making it a little bit fun, you know, some graphics popping on the screen, this or that, something to draw in someone who might not look at a self-service machine and say, that interests me. But getting some graphics, getting a little movement, making it fun, that seems like a really good idea to grab some new ones.
So before we open up for questions, I have one more question for everyone on the panel, and that is to pull out your crystal ball. What is the biggest change regarding gambling on horse racing you expect to see 5 years from now? Marshall, we'll start with you and just go down the line.
What do we see in horse racing gambling 5 years from now? I think it will be interesting. 5 years from now will be 10 years removed from the legalization of sports betting. Will we look back on this and this will be another one of those things that we hoped was going to change the game, like American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown or the Seabiscuit book or something like that? Or will this be something that we've been able to capitalize on? I don't have a good crystal ball to see that. I'm typically somewhat pessimistic, but I'm hoping that it's something that we can learn from and grow from. I'm a college professor, and I teach a course on the economics of racetrack wagering markets. Since the laws passed, I've had, you know, much interest in that and much interest in sports betting, and they've been very interested in horse racing just because of the gambling prospect and the fact that it's a game that you can potentially, you know, have a shot at winning. Yes.
So I see two paths here. One is the amount of new customers and new eyes to our sport that we're going to have over the next 5 to 10 years. And I can see this just even from our partnership with both Cedars and BetMGM. You know, the amount of marketing and the amount of interest. And these are companies, too, to have, you know, real strong roots in horse racing, whether they own racetracks, you know, domestically or have been in wagering, you know, internationally for years. So I believe there's a significant commitment from them to, you know, to drive new eyes to our sport. I also feel that there's going to be an exasperation of the seasonality of our sport as we go forward. And we're kind of seeing it now, where you get into the fall, you know, which used to be, you know, kind of really robust from a wagering standpoint. There is some stagnation that's happening in Q3, and that's something that needs to be looked at from an industry standpoint and making sure that we align our track schedules and content to look at the new landscape, because what's happened 3 years ago, 4 years ago, is not the same anymore with the different wagering opportunities that are out there, especially in the fall. I mean, NFL's running is going 17, you know, weeks. You've got college football games on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You got MAC action on Tuesday night, if anyone likes that, Ohio University. So there's just so many wagering opportunities, and it's going to be important to make sure the horse racing is aligned from a content filler, but also, you know, we have to make sure that we're not on top of that and kind of drowned out by it.
I subscribe to both of those comments. I'm going to look at it from an industry focus, too. 5 years from now, if the worst happens, and we know the dynamics within the industry, we might not have an A track west of the Mississippi. It's probably, and I trust it won't be that dire, but the way that we operate our industry has to be looked at. And we've talked a lot about the technology and the innovation. I think one thing that really needs to be innovated is the structure of our industry. Those sports that are great wagering products and doing very well as a sport have a central industry, a league office, if you will. And we've got to, with all of our disparate venues, alphabet organizations, we need to distill that. That's a negative. It gets much of the internal workings of the industry going in different directions. And it costs a lot of money too that could be applied elsewhere. And I think if the industry and maybe HISA is a step in that direction, as problematic as it's been, but to have 5 years from now an outlook, we have to have a realigned industry. We have to innovate on that restructuring. And I think we have, again, the opportunity as long as we can create the experience. And I like the comments too about the gamification, and that's something we are developing towards, as a company too.
Well, that's great. I mean, and to your point about restructuring, I mean, we look back at Ontario and what Colonel E.P. Taylor did there, and when it was, and a lot of the product was spread out and it was struggling, and maybe it wasn't doing so well. A measured consolidation did wonders. It gives us Woodbine, which is a player on the national global stage, and I think we could see some of that. It's a very real possibility that that maybe some tracks aren't here, but if it's done in a measured way, organized and planned out, it could very well be a boon for the wagering industry.
So on that, we'll open up the floor for any questions.
We didn't say anything controversial enough, I guess.
Apparently not. Thanks, Ray.
Interesting talk. While you were talking, I looked up the average age of a sports bettor, and it's like in the late 20s, early 30s. Average age of a horse bettor, like I think one track owner said our average demographic is dead. But it's a lot higher. Is that incongruous with each other? I mean, can we convert somebody in their late 20s to horse racing because it hasn't worked?
Whoever would like to.
I mean, I'll start. To me, the short answer is absolutely you can. I don't look at it. I look at it a little differently. I think there is a little bit of a funnel from the sports betting side of it, and especially I'll look at the online gaming side of it. Like it wasn't normalized. Now it's normalized. So I don't think that those same customers were betting cricket or tennis or golf, right? And if you look at the the pie graph of like what's going on in sports betting right now, it's 28% is in that other category. Well, why can't we appeal to that same customer base? We have in this industry, I think we have some of the best TV production in sports. It's fantastic. It's out there, and I think our sport is very consumable and digestible. We can show that you can win money doing this. We have the data and the analytics to kind of market towards that customer, because those customers really interested in, they like to have a kind of a vested interest in the sport. They just don't want to have a selection. So, from my standpoint, we have the ability to give them the same data as the NFL, where the Miami Dolphins cover 9 out of 10 times when the temperature is 85 degrees and it's partly cloudy. Well, we have all that data and all that kind of stuff to be able to give to that same kind of customer. So I don't see why we can't do it. Have we been as successful before? No, but I can tell you the demographics on the ADW side is starting to skew younger on it. It's not as he said, aged dead anymore. It's definitely skewing younger.
And Marshall, do you have something to add to
Well,
that?
I just would be, I believe there's an opportunity there, but the players who are, the younger players who are going to come over, they're going to be looking for opportunities to at least try to be a winning player, right? So they're playing sports, feeling themselves out, seeing this new environment. I had students who would, build golf models, for example, to look at betting in golf. They would be interested in horse racing, but the access to the data was prohibitively expensive. They can do these things in sports. They already know the sports that they're following. They're looking for opportunities to win, and they're trying to bet wisely. in our game, there's a startup cost in terms of learning about the sport, in terms of data acquisition, and then ultimately the price that they pay is recreational players. You can't become a sort of professional, high-volume player without at least proving yourself able to bet up to a certain point, right? So no one's going to say, hey, I'm new to betting, but I can bet X amount of money. Can you give me these low rates? It's not going to happen. And so I think that that's a big hurdle. And so anyone sort of looking at horse racing from the outside in sees the takeout and doesn't see an opportunity where they should invest their time. And so, and then that's not even counting the price movements and the fact that the CAWs and what they've done to effective takeout. So, I guess in terms of looking at new players to turn, I really do think we need to think about what we can do to make the sport appealing, and that it's got to start with pricing.
Yeah, I want to add one thing to that, though. It's incumbent on us to understand that, and I know you come at it from a certain standpoint, that every player that comes into the funnel and comes to our sport is not going to be a high-value player. It's very important that we have retail customers, some weekend warriors, those that have it as a hobby, to make the sport and the wagering appealing to them. And we don't have to obviously move everyone into and look at that and say like everyone has to get to X point. I think it's very important to appeal to the broad scope of different wagers that are out there. So.
There's no doubt, but I'm worried that we are starting to lose the weekend warriors and the recreational players, and that they're starting to get, they're starting to feel the effects. If you pick up the form and go play every weekend at your OTB, you're getting crushed by the odds movements that just weren't as prevalent 10 years ago. Sure. Or you're getting crushed by the teams. And so there's, I think that, and part of it is just simply solved by reducing the price gap that the teams, the price gap between the recreational player and the teams, right? So give them some of their money back and let them churn, right? So I agree with you that we want more recreational players. Just what I've seen, we're starting to lose recreational players. We're starting to lose weekend warriors, and even sort of the more professional players. They're walking away. They're betting sports, right? Even with how tricky it is to get a sports bet down, and so that's my concern.
Yeah. Every week with our handle reports, we list the age range, we list the amount of bet, we list, the types of bets. And what we're talking about here is the case. And attracting new retail players is tough. We have probably about 5 or 6 racing events a year that are going to get somebody's attention outside of, the everyday racing that we're doing, and and that can take in. We've had older players, younger players, female, males. I mean, it's still something we're trying to figure out. But right now, the attractiveness of the betting product, what we're talking about here, is right now behind sports, and it's tough. One of the things that we might want to look at too is, we talked about fixed odds horse racing. Maybe we should look at pari-mutuel sports. That is something that then maybe we can bring, on a more linear basis, players over doing combination bets, and similar to, for all the years we did the Dubai World Cup and World Cup Carnival, I started a Florida Derby World Cup bet, and it was successful. And I think here we can do bets on major football or other, motorsports events with racing. But that's, and I think that would be great for the customer experience.
Mark, did you have?
Yeah, so just following up on Marshall's concerns, and Nelson, you're talking about retail customers. A lot of times when we get these discussions, it becomes about the computer teams and how much are they winning. And I think the equation we're kind of all missing as being invested in the industry is how much are the retail players losing? And so I'm not sure why ADWs haven't talked about that. I think that's an important part of the game and the business. It might be even an important part of educating players or why you need to stick to whips or whatever. But I was curious, Nelson and Matt, if you know those numbers, they're probably the same number, but if you could share it with us just to kind of understand, like, it's probably the same across every ADW, but I think it's interesting to know. On a, we're dealing with what, a blended takeout of 22%, but what are retail players or you operate retail ADWs, what are they losing at?
Nelson, you want to go first? Or?
In terms of, I'm not sure, Mark, is that in
Like
terms of what they're losing?
Yeah, net ROI for the year.
Oh, gosh. I'm not going to be able to get you right down to a hard number, but I will tell you that we have, like I know Matt has, we have a group of your higher volume players, and they typically do, pretty well. And then we have a middle group there that does okay, but the retail players are not doing well at all. And that's what we're, I think, addressing here today. And I'll just say that there's just limits to when a player is going to burn out. And I think we offer a lot of advantages for it, a betting product, but it's complicated. The CAW factor is a huge factor. Odds that used to, a lot of our payoffs are still maybe better than some fixed odds, but payoffs aren't what they were. You don't give that retail player the chance to make, that really big hit that carries them for, another 3 months. And it's tough. We were talking before, and I don't know what it is, since June, we've really, flattened out some. So, and we've seen it through the retail numbers. And I've talked to other ADWs. I know Matt probably, getting new retail accounts now is I can see it's that much tougher than it was even last year, certainly the year before. So we're at a point where I think we're at a tipping point, for that, because sports betting is very established now.
So net ROI is really ADW specific and player specific. It depends on ADW. I would say that Nelson's ROI should probably be higher than our ROI. He's got what I would say is a group of seasoned players doing that. So when you have more of the retail segment, yes, the ROI does suffer. But we do track it. We track it at the player segment level. We track it at the player level. It's one of our key performance indicators that we look at, every day on our reports. And that's the really crucial thing that we try to do, at least at Naira Bets. And most ADWs are doing the same thing. We're trying to integrate as many tools, and robust handicapping content into the actual platform. We actually have goals to try to improve our players' ROI. Every year we look at that and say, here's the ROI, we want our players to do better. Because again, if our players are doing better versus other ADWs, then it's going to promote a higher churn on our ADW. So we look at it almost like they're a team, and we want them to do better than the other ADWs. So we'll do everything we can to try to stimulate that. And we know from a Naira content standpoint, obviously, we're very heavy on Naira. We try to do as much as we can to promote that.
On just and I want to make this point, on just the CAW front, it does seem to me that over the last 12 months, that my best proxy for CAW handle is that last click money, right? For example, I can look at Naira, and Naira's win pool and their late pick 5 had very little last click money. And if I compare that to their other pools, right, that's got to give me some proxy for what represents team money. For example, if you look at Naira's late pick 5 versus early pick 5 in 2022, there was 98% of the money in the late pick 5 was bet before the last click, and 91% the early pick 5. Now with the early pick 5, it's 70%, right? In some of the exotics, right, it's in 50 to 60%. So I've seen a bigger jump. I've seen a bigger jump in the amount of money bet in the last click over the last 12 months. And if you take that last click of money in the win pool for certain tracks, positive for all the amount of money bet in the last click in the win pool, which is kind of crazy to think about. And you know that they're crushing. So the win pool is the most competitive, efficient pool. So you know if they're crushing the win pool, they're just really crushing the tri-super, et cetera. I would make 2 points of that. One, if we want to help players' ROI, it seems like reducing takeout is probably one of the better ways to lower their price. The second point would be, I'm to the point where to solve the odds fluctuation problems, maybe we need to consider closing batch betting to our publicly available pools, right? The ones that we see are, I don't know how, I'm using the wrong word, but the win, play, show, double, exacta, just closing batch betting 2 minutes to post, right? Meaning that everyone's got to key in their bets for those wagers. You can do what the hell you want in the pick six and the superfecta, right? You can batch bet and upload those, but maybe we close batch betting for the ones that are visible pools to at least eliminate the visuals that will go on. If the teams want to keep playing, or if anyone wants to keep playing, they'll bet a little bit earlier, or they'll key them in by hand. I think that might help. Certainly what Naira's done has helped.
Ed?
Mark and I did not plan this 1-2 punch, but my background, I'm very familiar with retail player, and in a bet like the Rainbow Six, the ROI was negative 50%, so they're losing half their bankroll. And then just in general, it's 35 to 40%. I always find it disingenuous when racing says, oh, look at the same game parlays, those lose 25%. That's the same as our takeout. Well, okay, yeah, negative 25%, but your retail players are actually losing 35 to 40%, and that is, I mean, it's just not sustainable. It's not. I mean, I'm sure you all see the attrition rates and, you know, life of customer value, all that. That it needs to change.
Was that a question or a grievance?
I assume that and I understand why we wouldn't get a straight answer to what the ROI is. I'm sure both gentlemen know, but it's negative 35 to negative 40% based on my experience at a former employer.
Any thoughts to add?
I mean, I would just go in and say, I know Ed's got significant experience, but it really does vary by ADW.
Do we have any other questions?
I'll throw one more. Marshall, just in regards to the pricing with the takeouts and stuff, and I could see where I very much agree with you. And the bigger products, the Kentucky Derbies, I work at Keeneland, so Keeneland or Del Mar, they probably seem less incentivized to lower their takeout because it's kind of like they're at a casino, they're the roulette wheel that has 3 green zeros, and they see the same number of people playing the 1-0, even though the sophisticated bettor knows to play the 1-0 wheel. And do you think that if just a Keeneland or just Del Mar took the plunge and reduced takeout, would it take the entire industry following suit to really make a serious impact? Would it take like the whole state of Kentucky to attract attention to it and then force other people to join in? And also just curious as to what you thought the right number would be.
They're the ones who have to do it. The smaller tracks, the ADWs won't let them.
Yeah,
right? If the smaller track reduce takeout, they make them reduce host fee. So they can't do it. So, and as far as the like Derby goes, Churchill Downs having higher takeout Derby weekend, I totally get it. And that's totally understandable. Derby's a 20-horse field, right? But Keeneland is in such a unique position, right? They don't own an ADW, but they have real market power in their signal. So if I ran Keeneland, here's what I'd do. I'd lower takeout, especially on tries, supers, and et cetera. You basically, Keeneland could advertise, right? Do whatever you have in the whips and then drop tries and supers, let's say 18% is not even that low. You could drop to 18%. I would keep host fees the same, okay? You're getting your cake and eating it too. All you lose, right, is the margin on your on-track players. The CAWs, right, they're getting their rebates cut, but their effective takeout's the same. And then you can go and advertise, hey, we have the lowest takeouts across every pool in the country. Twin Spires, Express Bet, Naira Bets, they may not like it, but they're not going to cut your signal off. So you and Del Mar have a unique opportunity to actually experiment with lowering your takeout, and you don't have to move your host fee along with it. So I would love to see that happen. I feel like I've tried to press this point, right? You know, what would I love it to be? I'd love it to be 14% across the board, 16% across the board, right? And I'd like to lower the gap between the teams and recreational players, right? So, you know, that means I wouldn't necessarily move your host fee off what it would need to be. But Keeneland can do this and Del Mar can do this. Bring your takeout down flatten your takeout out across all wagers. Don't even change your host fee. And again, people are worried about the teams walking away. They're not going to walk away with a smaller rebate. Their effective takeout rate is going to be the same. Their rebates are lower, right? But it doesn't matter what they're paying as far as their takeout rate. It's the same. They're looking at their takeout rate, not the size of their rebate. And so, in fact, the team should benefit because as your takeout comes down, people will bet more into those pools or churn more. So it's a win-win. So that would be my message to Keeneland and Del Mar. Let's give it a try. Let's see what would happen. And give it a try over a sustained period of time. Don't do it one meet and say, well, it didn't work. These people don't, takeout doesn't work. You got to give it time. And remember, there are all sorts of other factors, right? It's not like we're looking at this in the vacuum, right? Any sort of theory would say if you lower price, it's going to increase handle. Other factors may be driving handle down, but here is a way that you can have your cake and eat it too.
Thank you.
Only y'all could do this. Only Keeneland and Del Mar could do this. I mean, a smaller track does this. They're not let them. They're not going to force them to drive down host fees.
Doug, do you have a question? We have room for one more.
Okay. We'll stay with Marshall and takeout and Kentucky. I believe HHR takeout is in the 8 to 9% range. First of all, to any of the speakers up there, am I ballpark correct?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So why?
Well, because they've realized the benefit of churn. I mean, I would make the argument is why not make it so that your HHR churn is the same as your takeout rate.
Okay, that was it. That's my question.
It's a churn.
Well, that's about
Look,
all the time.
People who play HHR, they don't know what the takeout is, but they're still betting it and set based on churn.
Well, I want to thank my panelists for a great discussion. Thank you to the RTIP for giving us the opportunity, and to the Turk Publicists for sponsoring this panel.
Thank you, Graham Consulting. They got more than their $550 entrance fee, so we appreciate all the value that you presented to Keeneland, and excellent feedback from Marshall. All right, we're going to change the set here quickly and get right into our next panel on